Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. In the first week of this year I published a video about my reading plans for 2025. At the end of each quarter I will do a check-in to see if I'm still on track, somewhat. Or if I'm that far off that I might as well stop making these plans altogether. So let's see how my actual reading of these first 3 months compares to what I had in mind at the beginning. As a reminder, this is the overview of the books I want to read this year. In total, I think I will read about 60 books, 40 of which will be fantasy. Because I had only a vague idea of the non-fantasy books, I only picked 5 and 1 question mark. How did I do? So far I have read 19 books with a total of 7,536 pages. That's an average of almost 400 pages per book. Regarding the number of books, I'm at 32%, so I'm a little bit ahead of schedule. Always a reassuring observation. Let's begin with the non-fantasy portion of it. I read 5 books out of the fantasy genre and only one of them was on my list. And that one was immediately my least favorite so far. I'm talking about A Leg to Stand On, a non-fiction book by Oliver Sacks. There is another book by this author on my plans, The Island of the Colorblind. I will definitely be reading that one or another one by this author because one miss does not dampen my appreciation for his writing one bit. The 4 non-fantasy books that were a surprise to me are A Little Princess, a lovely children's book by Frances Hodgson Burnett, To Kill a Mockingbird, the classical novel by Harper Lee, which was kindly gifted to me by one of my viewers, Proof of Heaven, an impressive report of Eben Alexander's near-death experience, and my favorite non-fantasy book so far, Blackwood's Blue Sky, the latest novel by Eowyn Ivey, which was a complete surprise to me in a number of ways. On to the 14 fantasy books I read this first quarter, half of which I planned and half of which were not planned. Although in hindsight I could have known about most of them. My guess about the 3 books in the Arc of a Scythe by Neal Shusterman was correct. I read all 3 of them in January and absolutely loved them. My first Gavriel Kay of this year, A Song for Arbonne, may just be the best book I have read in the fantasy genre so far. This one scored the full 100 points out of 100. Then I predicted I would be reading the first 2 books in the first Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and even though they didn't altogether live up to their promise, I read all 3 of them. So after The Blade itself and Before They Are Hanged, I also read Last Argument of Kings. The last of the planned fantasy books I read is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Like the GGK book, this one scored 100 points out of 100. So it's going to be exciting to see which will be my book of the year. But that is still a long way off. I already mentioned Last Argument of Kings, which I didn't think I would be reading this year. Although in hindsight I might have known. Most of the time when I start reading a trilogy, I end up reading all 3 books back to back. 2 books I simply forgot to put on my plans for 2025 are the first 2 in The Lord of the Rings. At the time I was compiling the list, I was already listening to The Fellowship of the Ring, and I recently finished listening to The Two Towers. I'm listening to the narration of Andy Serkis, and I'm really enjoying it. But it takes me about 2.5 months to listen to one book. So I think that the 3rd book in the series, The Return of the King, will be my final audio experience for a while. Another book I actually should have put on my plans is Magic Bites, the first novel in the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. I had bought the first 7 books in this series and was only waiting for the delivery of the first 2. These urban fantasy books were favourites of my good friend B.J. Minton, with whom I have done several buddy reads. I knew that as soon as they would arrive, I'd give them a go. So I will probably read 2 or 3 more of this series in the rest of this year. Also, The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss is not a huge surprise. I read this novella after The Name of the Wind. The only 2 that did surprise me were the first 2 novels in the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. Reading The Name of the Wind made me think back on how important names are in the original Earthsea trilogy I read ages ago in a Dutch translation. Out of nostalgia, I picked up these books earlier than I thought I would, and I will continue reading all of them this year. So that gives us this overview of how my reading reality at this moment looks like. 11 books on the whimsical side of things and 8 as promised. Either way, I'm very satisfied with my progress so far. Looking at the new overview of what's left for me to read according to my plans, there are 33 of the 40 planned titles left. All of those are still at the top of my TBR, so that hasn't changed. And I know that there are buddy reads coming up for The Cup of Promise by Jen Williams, The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams, and The Dreaming Tree by C.J. Cherry. Also, I'm currently reading Saucery by Terry Pratchett, very slowly. Next to that, I feel that my hunger for the Stormlight Archive is at a healthy level again. Other than that, your guess is as good as mine. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.